Amari Bailey stands out, baby. Is he the savior for UCLA's postseason run? And what does UCLA have to do to beat Oregon for a third time this year in the conference tournament? Let's talk about it on Locked On UCLA.
You are Locked On UCLA, your daily podcast on the UCLA Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody. It's Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Locked On UCLA. Thanks for making the podcast your first listen each and every day. It's free wherever you get it, and it's available on YouTube. So like, comment, and hit that subscribe button. We've got a lot of content coming for you guys here in the month of March, so be excited. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel, the official sportsbook of Locked On. You know, they just make every moment more by visiting FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. So welcome back, everybody. You know, everybody seemed a little bit angry with me when it came to the pessimism of UCLA. I can't come on this podcast when it comes to Jalen Clark's injury and say they are a clear-cut national championship favorite anymore based on what they have. They can still get there. They can still go to the Final Four, but you can't realistically say that they're the favorites in a year where there's so many teams that could go on a run, teams that we think are possible, and teams that we don't know what happened. But with the Pac-12 tournament, we get to see what the Jalen Clark-less Bruins look like. And again, it started with Amari Bailey. I didn't fully get into anything too informative in that reaction, just kind of let's get going. And I want to give some Bailey numbers. He is arguably the offensive X factor for UCLA going forward. Singleton will step up and he'll hit his threes, but he was already expected to be a shooter and a key guy coming off the bench as a veteran or even in the starting lineup now with Clark injured. So we can't exactly have Singleton as the X factor. I think in terms of a starter, a freshman, what we don't know what can happen, Amari Bailey's ability to explode is something that you look at Jalen Clark on the defensive end. He could explode defensively and turn it into offense. And while Amari Bailey doesn't exactly have that full defensive repertoire that, say, Jalen Clark has, Amari Bailey, with 26 points, a season/career high against Colorado and the 80-69 win in the Pac-12 tournament, equaled the 4 games previous that he had 26 points on 30 shots. And he showcased how he can do it, driving to the hole, getting fouled, converting free throws, which has been something of a sore spot for him this year. Only taking a couple of threes, but in rhythm and splashing a couple, shooting 66% from 3, only on 3 attempts. So we've seen the potential for Bailey, which can actually keep UCLA's offense a lot better and make it a lot better moving forward throughout March, which is a high point. Defensively, looking at the Colorado game, I know people didn't like the fact that, oh, Jalen Clark was out. He scores 14 points per game. What's going on here for UCLA when it comes down to, oh, Colorado was missing their second leading scorer? Yeah, but Colorado was missing one of their 2 key guys. They're equivalent to a Jaime Jaquez or a Tiger Campbell, and they still, did the Buffaloes, shoot extremely well in that game, over 50%. It was just the fact that UCLA was able to get some turnovers, get to the free throw line, and grind it out, which it's going to be that way. And it was always going to be this way for UCLA. Grind it out, sweat it out type of games to win each and every time, kind of like how they had to do it in that 2021 Final Four run in the NCAA tournament, where it started in the first 4, having to come back and beat Michigan State, go to overtime, maybe get a lucky couple of games in terms of matchups in the first round, but then from the Sweet 16 on to the Final Four, grind it out, eke it out, battle all the way up until that heartbreak with Jalen Suggs in the Final Four in overtime. So this is kind of the same recipe for success. UCLA will have to grind it out. Bailey will have to be one of the significant X factors in terms of UCLA's offense. He can explode, and he is giving us a glimpse of UCLA's potential ability to explode offensively, which we've seen at times, largely due to defense. But if they can just score, even if it doesn't start from defense, which this year for UCLA it does. It starts with defense and turns into offense. If they can score some points, eke out some higher scoring games than they had been all season long, then maybe they can prove themselves to be an even tougher out with Jalen Clark not playing with them in March Madness in the tournament, with him out for the rest of the season. Bailey is that guy in the starting lineup that's the X factor. And while Dylan Andrews and Will McClendon and people will say Nuba and Etienne all have interesting parts, it's the likes of Bailey that sits there as the guard that will be the guy that'll have to slot in most importantly to be that maybe third scorer, that fourth scorer that turns into a third scorer more consistently for UCLA. And yes, a lot of names thrown out like Dylan Andrews, Will McClendon. What I didn't like was the lack of a true bench in terms of the game against Colorado, because in that game, UCLA got a total of 3 bench points and 1 made field goal in 5 attempts. And we're already going to see this. We saw this even in the beginning of the year. Mick Cronin is already going to cut the rotation. And it's already slim as it is. And as much as we want to say we expect Andrews to have a big shot, or even McClendon come in and hit a big shot or take a couple of shots, maybe be that backup point guard for a few minutes, depending if it's Andrews, if it's McClendon, depending on the game, it will come down to Bailey being a true man of the people, being the freshman standout, that guy in the tournament. You see this. Every team has a player that maybe was really good, but then blossoms and gets into NBA lottery status convincingly with a March run to a Final Four and an Elite Eight, or just so many dominant performances that he's on everybody's radar after it is. And Bailey puts one performance in, and he has to do it repetitively to show that UCLA can score offensively and be able to handle the shortcomings that they have to deal with defensively, like they showed against Colorado, which is a key factor, but we'll see how that goes. For the Bruins, it was nice to see Tiger Campbell get 18 points, see Jaime Jaquez close it out. He's turned into a guy that maybe might not always put up points in the first half, but he's definitely going to close. Or if the game's slipping in the wrong direction, Jaquez, if in the first half, like we've seen before, if they're down, he'll go put in 10, 15 points in the first half and bring the Bruins back. So UCLA's got a bevy of options to get themselves offensively. It's just, can they pick up the defensive slack? Because the Colorado Buffaloes, well, they shot over 50% from the floor, 43% from 3. And in most times, you're playing UCLA and you score nearly 70 times, I would think the opposition would expect to win that game, especially when they're playing without one of their better players. Tristan Da Silva didn't shoot crazy efficient, but he still had 17 points. You could say it was lucky. You can say it was grit. I choose grit, slight little bit of luck because it's March, and you always have to get some sort of lucky in this one. And overall, UCLA grinded it out, leading by Amari Bailey, who has to be the X factor. Doesn't need to shoot threes, but finish in the paint. Get that mid-range jumper going. Get fouled and shoot free throws. Those are things that will lead UCLA to wins and score more points and be an offensive showcase, a little more than they were during the regular season portion of this 2022 to 2023 campaign. We'll tell you about the Oregon game when we come back after we tell you about FanDuel, because FanDuel Sportsbook, hey, they're the number 1 sportsbook in America. A no-sweat first bet, up to $1,000 back in bonus bets. If you don't win your first bet, you should go check it out because it's a super safe and secure, easy-to-use app. You can bet on everything from money line, point scores. It's super easy to use. You can get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 back when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to cash in on your no-sweat first bet. $1,000 back in bonus bets if you don't win your first bet. Make every moment more with FanDuel here with the official sports betting partner of Locked On and of the NBA. Cruising into segment number 2 of Locked On UCLA. It'll be a little bit of a shorter day, so bear with us. The Bruins will take on the Oregon Ducks, who were able to take down the darlings of the Pac-12 regular season in terms of the team who could upset anybody but did not get a consistent enough win total in Washington State, as Oregon was able to beat them with a bye, didn't have to play, beat Wazoo 75-70 in a game down to the end. I believe a late 7-0 run for the Ducks won that game. And now it was a battle between 2 dark horse teams. It was either Washington State or Oregon in my mind that could truly put themselves up into contention to be that bid-stealing team from the Pac-12. And it turns out it's Oregon, who maybe over the course of the season has definitely not proven themselves to be a tournament team, but in a weekend-like scenario and a Dana Altman-led team, they've proven they can do this before, and with enough pieces, a little bit of health, and a little bit of luck, they can maybe eke one out and try and get themselves to the tournament with a couple more wins. UCLA says, no, we've got a 1 seed to play for, so that begs the question. If UCLA wins this game, are they still a 1 seed? bracketology's latest release from Joe Lunardi before the Oregon game and after UCLA's win from Colorado, still had the Bruins actually as a 1 seed in the West. And of course, the big thing that Lunardi said is if they win the tournament, they'll stay a 1 seed. If they don't, then they won't. Mick Cronin has different words. I think if UCLA wins this Oregon game, gets to the final, and plays like an Arizona State, and Arizona State wins, I think the Bruins could be a 1 seed, considering the Sun Devils are playing for a tournament berth. If UCLA can win this Oregon game and then play Arizona, it's a high-profile matchup, which you need to win to make your resume look even better, but also you lose that game, and it gives some more naysayers in terms of UCLA's resume some more ammunition in that category. So I initially said, before Jalen Clark's injury, the Bruins, if they could go 4-1 over their last 5 games, which includes 2 wins over the Arizona schools, 2 wins in the Pac-12 tournament, and then maybe losing in the Pac-12 tournament championship, I thought maybe they could hold on to their 1 seed potentially if that's the way it fell. At this moment, as the number 2 team in the country, maybe the number 4 in the overall bracket, depending on how things play out, here's what Oregon stands out. Remember Jermaine Couisnard. He didn't play in the first game against the Bruins, but he did play in the second game against UCLA, put up 19 points, didn't shoot a lot of threes efficiently, and overall for the Bruins, they kept N'Faly Dante in touch, kept him impact, as both games against Oregon, they've kind of been similar somewhat to the Colorado games. Not exactly the physical, super crazy style of it, but the fact that UCLA, who has been a slow starting team this year, they got out to slow starts against both games against Oregon, trailing both times at halftime, which you don't want to make that a routine in March. You're trailing at halftime every single game. I'm sorry, I'm not sure how long we can handle that throughout March. How many years of our lives will be cut off if the Bruins are trailing every time at the half and still win in March in the tournament? So for UCLA, one odd little particular thing I noticed against the Ducks each in these first 2 matchups, UCLA kind of struggled in the first half of games. Oregon in that second meeting in Eugene blitzed them, I believe, to an 8-0 start. The second half, UCLA shot 9 of 14 from 3 combined between the 2 games. 54% in Eugene, and they shot even close to better than that against Oregon the first time. They shot 57% against Oregon from 3 in the second half. So both second halves were keyed by timely threes, shooting them efficiently, and then being able to score in the paint while also getting a lot of free throws. UCLA getting 21 free throws in that second game. Not as many in the first game, but they converted. So the big thing is UCLA kind of buoyed those runs in the second half by clutch, timely three-point shooting on big runs after Oregon big leads in the first half. So the big thing is, what does UCLA need? Today, this is what I'm asking. I'm asking for a freshman to step up. Which one is it? It's Adem Bona, who hasn't had the best of games against the Oregon Ducks this year, having to go against N'Faly Dante, who is playing with a bit of maybe some ankle discomfort that he suffered against Washington State, but that is something to be seen. For Adem Bona, game 1 against Oregon way back in December, 17 minutes, 0 points, 4 rebounds, and 3 personal fouls. And we've seen Adem Bona. We know what it looks like when he affects a game. That was not one of those performances. And then for UCLA, in a different game for them against the Oregon Ducks back in the middle of February, Adem Bona played 13 minutes. And while he did get 6 points, 4 rebounds, he also fouled out in 13 minutes. So he hasn't seen a lot of time on the floor against the Ducks, against the big bruising interior that is headlined by N'Faly Dante. So can Adem Bona prove against a big physical presence down low from, a high major team? UCLA will certainly have to deal with their big time their low post presence against the opposition in the tournament. This is a big chance for Adem Bona to prove he's learned throughout the year and can stick on the floor in a game where this team, Oregon, needs this game a lot more than UCLA. That's just stating sheer facts. UCLA wants this one. They desperately want to be the 1 seed. Yet, Oregon is playing for their season's life on the line. And with Adem Bona, this is maybe his chance for a standout game. For Amari Bailey to continue his resurgence in my mind, all I need is 15 to 16 points, efficient, no turnovers, limited turnovers, and he'd still continue to be, in my mind, a good replacement and uptick in value scoring-wise. But for me, the key in this game, UCLA, as I said before, second half shooting, but Bona How can he handle defense without picking up fouls? Something he's been struggling with all year. Can he can he get rebounds? Can he hit the glass? Can he score points and be that guy that blocks shots, chases things down with the uber athleticism, as opposed to the guy we wish we had in the game because he's in foul trouble on the bench? So that's the thing. And I think another key for this UCLA game, the bench probably has to show up. When you're playing these 3 games in 3 nights, 2 games in 2 days, you're going to need your bench to show up. I'm not entirely sure who it has to be. I just think there's got to be some sort of production, whether it's Andrews, whether it's Etienne, if Bona's in foul trouble, or Nuba, or McClendon. There's a variety of ways those guys can come in, and it's not always the same guy every time, or it can just be one impact play emotionally against the Oregon Ducks. But when you start to play back-to-back games, and even in the NCAA tournament, you don't play this many games within a weekend. It's only during conference tournament time before Selection Sunday. And here UCLA is, 1 game in the books, already 2 emotional games last week, an emotional unrest coming with the Jalen Clark news getting leaked, because I'm pretty sure Mick Cronin didn't want that known before Selection Sunday, considering there was a source that told Stadium, that told Jeff Goodman, and was started getting tweeted around all across the country. So again, the bench and look at Adem Bona. Those are 2 things that might make an interesting one. And, slow starts have plagued UCLA all season long, and then eventually check out that second half 3-point shooting percentage. Those have been keys in UCLA wins over Oregon the first 2 times this year. In the meantime, as we transition into segment 3 of Locked On UCLA, check out Built Bar because, with Built Bar, they're just a wonderful protein bar because they taste like a candy bar, 100% real chocolate, but you get whopping grams of protein. You can go to BuiltBar.com and check out Built Bar because, 15% off your order. Built Bar, they've got it all. Go to your nearest Walmart. You got churro flavor. You can get an almond flavor. You can get 100% real chocolate. It's a protein bar that actually tastes like a candy bar, but still, it's healthy for you. So go check it out, Built.com. You're not going to want to miss it. Check it out with Built. Now cruising on into the last segment of Locked On UCLA, the Bruins, funny enough, they're playing Oregon this weekend. They're just second road series and second trip on the road for John Savage's bunch this year, which has actually won 5 in a row since losing the series to Vanderbilt in Nashville. UCLA 10-2, and they start Pac-12 play this week. So big games on a Friday against the Ducks in Pac-12 play. Of course, if it's in SoCal or wherever in California with the rain, it might be a bit tough to come by. Here we are. They're going to Eugene, which normally with the weather and the rain over at PK Park, that could be a problem, especially in the early portion of the season. However, they get to play that series. So UCLA gets day games, all 3 games against the Oregon Ducks. What's the key for the Bruins, who are picked second in the Pac-12? Well, they're red hot, coming off a midweek win against Long Beach. In the SoCal College Baseball Classic, they beat Tulane. Sac State got a win over rival USC in a non-conference capacity. Can UCLA continue to swing the sticks and get good starting pitching? That is the key to try and get yourself started off well in Pac-12 play, because starting on the road for a team whose only time on the road, they lost a series, and with Oregon, they're kind of up and down. They're usually a top 20 team, or they can be just outside. It can go back and forth based on what they are, and Oregon's fairly recently hosted a regional at their park. UCLA would love to get a win, considering the gauntlet that is the Pac-12. Last year, USC was one of the worst teams in the Pac-12, and the Bruins lost 2 out of 3 to them, and still UCLA had an easy time making the NCAA tournament. So you don't want to go on the road and give up 2 to 3 games. Don't want to get swept against the Ducks and then have to find yourselves playing Arizona and Washington before the backloaded schedule where you have to play Stanford on the road, USC on the road in back-to-back weeks. And then, did you forget? You have to play Oregon State and Arizona State to end the season. And Arizona State's maybe not the power as they once were. That's still a tough place to play on the road. And Oregon State, I've seen them in person. They're a pretty shored-up ball club. Not exactly, maybe in my mind, top 5 potential, but Oregon State's a pretty good club. So Pac-12 play starts this weekend for UCLA. Just kind of take a look out for it. Who can step up and get their swings going in conference play so far? Let's take a look at, who's getting things going for UCLA. Who are the statistical leaders for the Bruins so far? When it comes down to Deuce Gorson, a 400 batting average, about 12 games in the season. There's still lots of games to go. The bulk of the season. This is the part of the season where if you're redshirting, this is where you've played your games. And if you had an injury, you can't play past this amount of games or this weekend per se in conference. That's when it gets to the dicey part. You've seen the first couple of weeks. Maybe the cold will eventually wear off, especially in California. But it's been Deuce Gorson, who's hit 3 home runs. You've got Kyle Karros. You've got John Vaughns, who maybe doesn't have the best hitting right now in terms of batting average, but he has a great power stroke, the UCLA football player into baseball player. So the Bruins are finding ways to get a power stroke with 16 home runs, 91 RBIs, scoring runs, stealing some bases, 16 for 24. So even at the bottom of their lineup, they're getting some power. But where's Cody Schreier? Well, Cody Schreier is hitting .255 this year, who is All-American, freshman All-America, all those accolades. Maybe it's a sophomore slump. What's going on with him? That's something you have to look out for when it comes to Schreier. Maybe John Vaughns can up that average. But the Bruins are being led by Jack Holman, who's started every game but 2, Kyle Karros, and Deuce Gorson. Those are the guys that have been propping up the UCLA averages. The only 3 in the lineup that are hitting over 300 in terms of consistent playing time. So can the other guys help step it up in terms of consistent at-bats, consistent grinded out ABs? We'll find out. And in terms of the pitching staff, quickly, Alonzo Treadwell, an ERA just over $1. He's 2-0, 17 innings. He's got 26 strikeouts to 4 walks, a batting average against of 172. Those are significant numbers for a guy who's thrown 17 innings, leads the Bruins in WHIP, ERA in terms of starters, and then you've got 2 wins in the starting rotation. That is the guy. And don't forget Jake Brooks, who's had a rough start, the opening day starter, 4.5 ERA. Can he kind of get back down to earth and find ways to not give up runs in early portions of the game? I know that ERA is a little propped up because of what happened against Vanderbilt, but can that change? You've got Michael Barnett, Kelly Austin, all 3 players who have pitched over 12-plus innings and have an ERA just under 1.5. So the big thing is, can Cody Schreier get it back? Can Jake Brooks get it back? Those are 2 key guys who have high expectations for this season. One from last year, it's the shortstop. The other one for a back-to-back opening day starter, which doesn't always happen under John Savage's team. But for Brooks, can he slowly rekindle it? He's 2-1. He started 3 games. And some might say it's super early, and it is. And the ERA is ballooned up because of one bad appearance. But if he can stick with being consistent in the zone, in the strike zone, then he should do just fine because he's hit 4 guys and he's walked 5. So that would mean if you combine his hit 5 pitches with his walks, 17 Ks to 9 walks, 17 strikeouts when it comes to 9 walks. That's almost a 2-to-1 strikeout to walk ratio, maybe a little worse than that. And the rest of the starting staff has even better numbers than that. So for a team that has one of the better numbers when it comes to pitching staffs and ERAs across the country, if you read D1 Baseball, Baseball America, they've been talking about it all across the country. But it's Brooks, who UCLA wants to see be more consistent in the strike zone, give up a little bit less hits. He's given up 15 so far in 14 2/3 innings. That's more than 1 hit per inning in his outings. He can settle it down and make that one Vanderbilt outing just the only bad one this season, then UCLA should be just fine. So we'll see how Schreier and Brooks bounce back as it's time to get ready for Pac-12 conference play. In the meantime, UCLA fans, we will react to the Oregon game as soon as it's done. So get excited, get pumped, and be ready to go here on Locked On UCLA. Go make Locked On College Basketball your second listen. It's a good show. Andy Shatton, you got Isaac Shade, both guys on opposite sides of the coast who can give you a full, well-rounded perspective across the country on how to kind of size up your bracket because Selection Sunday is just around the corner. I'm Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer signing off on this Locked On UCLA podcast. 8 clap time, baby. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. UCLA. UCLA fight, fight, fight. This has been Locked On UCLA. Go Bruins.